wound attachments, you know, that are attached to the people walking down the street past me. So this is a concept, of course, but this is something that it's not a faith thing. This is a knowing.
This is a knowing, yes.
Yeah, it's a knowing. It's a very different thing, like you said, in sitting in the pews and having faith and you know, so on and so forth. No, this is a knowing. It's very different. I'm glad you mentioned that.
No. This is something that becomes irrefutably convincing to the individual because of their life experiences, where it is a constant evidence, a constant deliverance. And you see it not just with your own personal lives, but you're seeing it all around you with other people in their own lives. So it becomes not only an individual, but it becomes also a collective testimony of fact, not just speculative or outright blatant faith as we understand it. I believe it because I want to believe it. No, this is not I believe it because I want to believe it. Here's where you become, I am in this because I'm convinced of its reality, because I've seen it over and over and over and over again in my individual life and in the life of others. It becomes that convincing beyond the notion of coincidence. It goes beyond coincidence. Like, for example, someone like myself, I've been practicing for 41 years now. You know how many thousands of people I've consulted that I've divined for?
It's in the thousands, I know.
It's in the thousands. And I can tell you that I can guarantee you that every one of those thousands have been an experience to me, to my own religiosity, to my own spirituality, to my own state of being convinced of its reality. Because I've seen it in so many thousands of cases that I myself are handling, let alone those that I trained with, those that taught me and their experiences as I was there as an apprentice and later on as a disciple. And I've seen that in their lives and in their life work with others. You see? So thousands, yeah, I lost count when it comes to thousands, you see? So it goes beyond this notion or this potential argument that which is rather superficial and dismissive. You know? It's not out of coincidence. This is not coincidental. This is a matter of fact. This is here and now. That every time we do a consultation and we say to someone, look, how you doing? You seem everything at work seems like you're secured and everything is fine, is wonderful. Not true. You're going to be fired within 90 days. Something is going to happen where you're going to get fired. And yes, within 90 days, something out of the blue, that unimaginable takes place, and you are fired in 90 days. But you know what? At the same time you said that to that person, you said another 20 things to other 20 different people, and in that same 90-day period, all 20 cases, each in their individual mundane issues, were accurate. And this happens to you over and over and over and over again as a matter of individual experiencing, is it? Mm-hmm. That's what becomes individually convincing. That's radically different to the culture that we're in and the mindset of the culture that we're in and, if you will, the interpretation or the lens coming from a Judeo-Christian belief system. Radically different. Radically different. In fact, I have not said this yet, but I should have, and now it's just remembered. When people come in for a consultation, they're going to interrogate. They're there to inquire and interrogate God. That's what the consultation is. They're there to interrogate the spiritual realm. It's you tell me what's going on in my life to convince me that you're connected. Once you do that, I want to know the remedy. We're here to inquire, and the diviner's role is to inquire and get to the essence or to the core of why you're going through what you're going through, and also you get the spiritual guidance, not the human, but the spiritual guidance as to what the remedy is. And with respect to that remedy, that once the ritual is done, we're expecting, we're projecting, we're understanding what the end result will be. Which is also radically from a Christian perspective. You go to church every Sunday and you pray your heart out, and you put all your goodwill behind your prayers and your human conduct and everything else, but you know what? Nobody's talking to you. Nobody in that church knows your problems. You're not hearing a voice or visualizing and seeing Jesus or anyone else standing before you and talking to you and giving you direction and being very specific and giving you guidance. You see? It's a whole different other realm. It's a whole experience. Radically different. Here we do, and that's another difference between Christianity and Lukumi. When you come to Lukumi, yes, we are here to question God. We want to know, God, why I am going through what I am going through, and God, I want you to tell me what I need to do to fix my problem. And I will trust that when you tell me how to the remedy, I trust and I expect the remedy to work. It has to be tangible, God. It cannot be that God was busy and forgot to fix my problem, or the patience. I need to wait until God decides to be gracious enough to fix my problem. See, that's the difference between the faith approach and this tangible approach. And that's also a very important thing that people need to understand coming from a Judeo-Christian culture. There's a radical difference here. Make sense?
Sí, señor.
Sí, señor. Okay. Me alegro que lo que yo estoy diciendo tenga un gran sentido.
Sí, sí. Yes, okay. It makes a lot of sense. And that's what I said previously about the aleo and the aleo knowing it's something, it's a tangible, it's a feeling, it's evidence that you receive. And when it's not right, you get real tangible, mundane, and spiritual evidence of these things. And it's not something that the English language can really articulate. I was hoping that you could articulate it, but it's really something that they can't be. It's that connection that is that can actually be seen.
Okay, so people like yourself or anyone else who's in this tradition who has this spiritual gift, whether it's visual or auditory, or even those that have the gift of trance, or those that have the ultimate gift, which is possession. You can't argue with these people because this becomes their life experience, and it's an ongoing constant. It's a constant. And as time progresses, it becomes a more and more of a constant, and more tangible, and more real, and more convincing. So you can't sit there and say, "Listen, I'm hallucinating." Well, what do I hallucinate every week? And everybody that I express my hallucination to regarding their individual lives, it turns out to be true. Come on now. That goes beyond the ability of science to explain. So I think we kind of briefly, but I think in a nutshell, we understand the first two levels of access here. The third level, of course, is the godparent level, which is a whole other new world, a whole other difference. This is like entering a seminary. Okay, that's a different relationship. Now we're talking that there's protocols, there's rules, there's regulations of human conduct. There's a systemic approach to your religiosity and how you connect and disconnect to the spiritual reality. Your spiritual reality also comes forth and manifests itself in ways in which are demanding, in ways that the individual human is not used to absorbing and responding to. So it becomes a very complex learning process. A lifetime is now viewed in a whole other different worldview because you're engaging your reality in from a different scope of things, and the manifestations and what the teachings are in real time, what those experiences are, the consistency of it, the accuracy of such experiences are constantly evolving and increasing in its tangibility, and that is a fact. That's how it that's the world you enter. And so now we're talking priesthood. You're getting into that realm of priesthood. So you're entering a world of huge complexity that I don't care how many years of priesthood one has. When you enter the priesthood of Lukumi faith, you have entered a new way of life, a daily living, with a knowledge that is very individual, and that spiritual DNA, as I call it, is very individualized, and that individualized DNA is basically characterizes the essential traits of one's God-given gift once we're born. We're born with that spiritual DNA. So this becomes a lifetime schooling. I often remind people, I say, once you enter the priesthood of Lukumi, is like going to school and never being able to graduate. Because until the moment you pass and you move on physically, you're still experiencing something anew, something that is revealing knowledge to you, something that's adding to your base, is it? For better or for worse. And every experience, whether it turns out to be a negative experience or outcome or a positive one, both are not seen as negatives or positives. They're both viewed as character building, experiential, and building your knowledge base and who you are. And so it is that knowledge that one, as one gains that knowledge is expected for the priest to internalize that knowledge for better or for worse and understand its nature, because the nature of that experience is not only applicable to the individual life of the priest, it is that knowledge that the priest has now acquired that is also applicable to the experiences and circumstances of other human circumstances that arise in other people's lives. And that's what makes you an experienced priest or priestess. That's where you can best provide service and guidance, sound guidance, and make a difference, transformational difference, to the betterment of that individual, to that God child, that person that you're mentoring, that person that you're trying to help in their human needs, no matter if it's the most simplistic human need to the most complicated ones, even to the life-threatening ones. How do you then, if you don't understand and don't have that knowledge base, which is not in any book, this is something that's life experience. This is part of your training, and it's an ongoing learning process. So anyone in this faith that says, oh, I've been in the priesthood for 60 years, you go like, yeah, okay, fine. You know, I'm honored and I respect the 60 years of religious service, but I want to know what's inside your head. That's what I want to know. Don't tell me how old you are in the priesthood. I want to know who you are. I want to understand what you know, you see, because it is that 60 years worth of human experiences in the framework of our religious principles that is of value. You could be 60 years in the priesthood and really not have transformed and become so internally transformed or intellectualized by the human experiences. So you may not really be the right person to adequately advise me about my problem. An example, I've participated with priests, diviners much older than I have. In instances where the person that came in and needed to make a critical life decision regarding their finances. The wrong advice would have run this person bankrupt. And not only bankrupt, would have put them in poverty pretty much for the rest of their lives. They would have lost everything. And so you needed to be that accurate. You needed to understand with great accuracy the nature of their problem in order to be the best counselor or the best advice possible. So how do you do that? Well, you could only do that not only just by understanding what the spiritual message is, but understanding the dynamics of interpreting that message with specificity, with accuracy, and on point in the right direction for success. That doesn't come by way of reading books, which this society is obsessed with. Everyone in this society thinks that just because you go and buy a book where, you can go out and buy a book that speaks about, that's really a book about religious counseling. And this is like saying, okay, you never went into the seminary, you never graduated, and you never went through the learning process, and you believe that you're equipped because the church published a book about religious counseling, that you are intellectually capable without understanding what the rules of interpretations are, or the engagement is. Do you think you're capable of just reading because your intellectual capacity allows you to interpret a paragraph? That's insane. That's cheating yourself. That's a false imaginary, but then we're in a society that moves this way. That's a problem. That's a problem. How can I, after 40-some-odd years, plus add, 80-some-odd on top of that of my own religious trainers, my teachers? That's over 100 years of knowledge that I'm walking with. You think that is in a book? It's not rational to think that way. That's in our heads, out of our own life experiences. So that's knowledge those are my tools that I bring to the table when I'm doing a divination service just for someone, or taking them in and becoming their counselor or their godparent, for that matter, isn't? The godparent level is very clear. This is like saying, it's like a marriage. Here's where we're going. Like, you know what? We're creating a spiritual, in the alchemy of our ceremonies, we're creating a spiritual bond between our material relationship and our spiritual cores, our spiritual levels, that which becomes our spiritual essence. There's a bond that's created by the alchemic ceremonies that we engage in the priesthood. We have to understand that complexity at a whole other different level. You see? So now it's like a marriage, a true marriage. Let's take the words of Christianity in a marriage, just to make an analogy, when we say, okay, when you sit there in the marriage and you go like, yeah, we're getting married for better or for worse. Well, you know what? That's exactly what you just created in that bond with your godparents once you were ordained into the priesthood at the material and at the spiritual level. Often I have seen through my years where at the human level, the relationship is severed for whatever reasons that might have taken place. And then we have the experience of separation of the godchild and the godparent. They no longer have a sustainable relationship. Okay, fine, but to believe that just because the humans separated, that somehow we broke the spiritual bond, that's not true either. We don't break that bond like that. That bond just does not break like that. There's a human separation. That's all that took place here. And then when we have our religious rituals and social religious events. People are getting possessed with the deities, and then you know what? The deities come up to you and they remind you about that. They go, what happened to you with your elder, that's a human issue. Don't confuse that with us, the divinities. I've seen that over and over again in my life experiences. So that also becomes a teaching. That's not written in a book. That's life experience in your face. And you see that over and over and over again throughout your priesthood years in one's own personal experience, and again in the collective experience as well. There's more than substantiated examples of those types of moments. So that's part of your learning as well. This is a very complicated thing. Now, there's rules. There's a different relationship. There's a different guiding force of rights and responsibilities that ties the godparent and the godchild. And those expectancies, like you said, Dia, is something that is discussed and put forth with time as the relationship begins to grow, right? It's almost as if you started dating someone and then that date turns into a marriage. Well, as the dating progresses, it's becoming more and more, the two people are becoming more and more intellectually close to each other and becoming more knowing of each other's ways. And there's some compromises that take place on both sides and until we find common ground in all of our most sensitive areas of concerns in our relationship. And that turns ultimately into, we understand each other. We understand each other's rights and responsibilities as individuals without sacrificing our individual identities, because the marriage should not, in essence, totally change one partner's identity to be absorbed by the other. You want each person to keep their identity, but at the same time, you have to find that common ground, that balance point where it is. And that comes over time and a lot of talking, a lot of experiencing in the relationship, and a lot of trust, right? And this is very similar. A similar path. That's the best analogy in simplistic terms that I can, given our time, that I can point to. Now, let's get into our points here of concern, and that is what are the guidelines. First and foremost, let me remind everyone everything, or part of what I'm going to say, but more than what I'm going to be able to say, is posted in the Church of the Lukunli Babaluaye website. I suggest you might, visit the site. It's in our journal section. So click on the journal link and go to Contemporary Issues. I believe that's where it is. And the title of the page there is it's titled "Selecting a Priest." Selecting a priest. So look for that document. It's there for everyone to freely access whenever you want to, and read it a million times if you want to, or just once. It's up to you. That's your free will. But I advise that the more you understand what's being said there in this guideline, the better your chances are to have the better possibility of experiencing our faith in the most constructive way, and not having to experience something that is not the best thing for you. Another thing that we have in our faith, of course, like any other religion, if you're entering the priesthood, you're basically entering a binding contract between the hierarchy of the priesthood and the spiritual. It's not a superficial relationship that you're engaging at that point. Again, not everyone is destined to become a priest or a priestess. That's unheard of. This perception is just simply erroneous, okay? So one of the things you want to do you might want to, those of you that are listening and have a little pencil and paper with you might want to do that. Or again, just go to our website. It's all there in writing, and you can just read it and just meditate over what it's saying there. It's really internalize what's being said. First thing you want to do is get the names. If you're dealing with a Lukumi priest or priesthood, this is how it works. We all have, to enter the priesthood, we all have more than one godparent. So what we need to do is, as outsiders engage in this, is the first thing we want to know. It's like going to a doctor or any other professional, an attorney. You want to see their license, first and foremost. You want to do your homework before you just simply and voluntarily turn your spiritual, your spirituality and turn it, just voluntarily put it on a silver plate and hand it to someone that you really don't know. You just can't do that with your vulnerable psychic. Just hand it over and have anyone just start mingling with your spiritual essence. That's insane. The same thing is that if you have a case, you just don't go out there and hook up with the first lawyer you liked. Oh, because I like what he looks like, or I like his off by appearances. You were captured by the imagery, and you don't do your homework. Well, he seems nice. Sounds knowledgeable. Well, what he said sounds right. Well, I'm going to hire this attorney for a serious case. You don't do that. Your doctors, think of women. Do you just go to any gynecologist because somebody referred you to them? I don't think so. You try to be as informed as possible. You ask the questions that you feel that you need to ask to be as best informed as possible before you put your hands in your body inside of a gynecologist's office. If you're pregnant, you're going to do the same. You're going to be extraordinarily careful. Who is going to be the doctor that's going to help you through and mentor you and counsel you and assist you medically to achieve the best outcome, because you're pregnant and you want your child. That's and that's something that's extraordinarily important. Well, so it is those kinds of significant life things. If you go to a doctor, and you're injured and you need an operation to save your life, well, you just don't sit there and put your body into the hands of the first doctor that says he's a surgeon. You do your homework, and you try to get as informed as possible before you engage. Well, this is not, the concept of engagement here is really not any different as you would in terms of any of these other kinds of professionals. You're dealing with a religious professional. That's all. That's the only difference. One's a surgeon, the other one is this, the other one is that. This one is a religious professional. And you have to treat them as a religious professional. So you need to get your mind around what questions, what kind of information do I or should I have before I put my vulnerable psychic, before I put my critical life concerns in the hands of this religious professional to handle. You just don't turn it over. So that's my first recommendation. Think that way. The more you think that way, the better off you are in reducing the potentiality of being scammed or simply mismanaged. And if you're mismanaged, it is you, the person, that's going to suffer the consequences. And you know what? When you come to these religious systems, there's no malpractice lawsuits, okay? So don't even go there. You better be as sure and as convinced as possible with evidence, with facts. And follow your own common sense, your own instincts, your own human instincts, okay? So it has to be rather broad and holistic. So the first thing you want to do when you engage someone in our faith is, get in there and in a very respectful way. You're talking to a professional. Don't treat these people in your tone and in your language as they were a suspect of some crime. Okay. You would not do that to a lawyer or a professional doctor or anyone else for that matter. Okay, so don't bring that kind of character, that kind of attitude to when you talk to a priest or a priestess. Let's the same secular respect needs to be afforded to the priest or priestess because we are professionals at what we do. Okay, at what we do. So the first thing you need to know is to get the names of the priests and priestesses that trained this person that you're talking to. Let's get their background. Let's get their background. In our religious system, it is acceptable. It is normal to ask, who are your religious elders? Where were you ordained? What year were you ordained? Where? What location? What geography were you ordained? Okay. And when you get the names of the elders, you want to ask, where were they ordained? How many years of priesthood are we talking about here with these people? You need to know, you need to start formulating related questions of qualifications. So first thing is, tell me about your license, okay? Tell me about your credentials. And in this faith, the credentials comes from your elders, from our elders, whoever ordained us, and what that religious community, where is it located? When did this take place? Who did this stuff? Who are your witnesses? Who was present? Things that one can understand and get a good feeling of, and in most instances, trackable. They are trackable. The next thing you want to know is move into a mindset of qualifications. Determine how and why they selected their own elders. How did they approach that critical life decision, those choices? How did they settle on? How did they become convinced that their elders was the best choice for them? You want to hear that story, because that becomes very extraordinarily revealing about the person's psychology. Okay? What were the motivating and convincing factors that led to making that choice? There are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of, actually hundreds of thousands and actually millions worldwide of priests and priestesses of our faith. So among the millions, how does this one priest or priestess end up choosing that elder, that godparent? So we want to hear that story. What was the rationale? What was the reasoning here? What was the logic? And what was the outcome? Are they still, as you speak to them, do they still have a relationship, an ongoing relationship with their elders, or have they broken apart? We want to know that as well. We want to know what those elders, or even the person that you're talking to, that priest or priestess, you want to inquire about specific their religious lineage, but as not only the lineage, but you want to know what their contributions have been, not just for their own religious group and self, but also what has that priest or priest contributed in a constructive way to the broader society. We want to know what their legacy looks like. So it's like asking an attorney. You come in because you had an auto accident, and you messed up. Let's say you messed up your spine or your neck. So you're going to need a therapist on one end, and you're going to need the lawyer to handle your case. Well, you want to ask the lawyer, how many of these injury cases have you had? What's your experience along this line? You want to know. And you want to know in how many of those cases that you have handled, how many did you win versus how many of these cases did you lose? We want to know that lawyer's record to get a sense of what we're getting ourselves in. Okay? You also want to ask, what kind of resources does this lawyer have? Same way, you want to know what kind of resources does this priest have in his priestly works. So that, does the priest, for example, make use of referrals, or does the priest think that is a know-it-all, that there isn't anything, there is no spiritual issue or life issue that the priest cannot handle by themselves? If that's the case, you know what? Leave. Don't stay there. There is no such thing as a one-person band. It does not exist. So that begins already to show you that you're starting to deal here. You're starting to get tidbits of an egomaniac. That's one of the steps that should raise a flag in your mind, because a person is already expressing that they don't need to use others under any real circumstances, or only by exception, because they're so talented and spiritually equipped to handle anything that's thrown at them. An expert at everything. That's scary. That's a red flag. That's a red flag. Okay. So we want to know what if or do they or do they not have a referral, a network where they can draw from different expertise depending on the case that they're handling? Do they make use of those resources or not? That is important to know. The other thing we want to know is what they consider and can tell you that they believe to be their main area of experience. What is their main point of experience? Everyone in the priesthood is better at some things and less on others. And it's just like attorneys. It's just like doctors. Okay? So we want to know, what are you best at? What is the types of cases that you most have experiences with? You want to know. That is also very revealing. If it's a 24/7 practicing priest or priestess, you want to know what are the types of most common cases that they handle year in and year out. What are the most common cases? And kind of find yourself in if any of those primary or most frequent types of cases, is that somehow related to your case, the reason why you're there? Does that somehow, are those cases somehow relevant to your life? Want to know. Another thing you want to do is observe the diversity of either students or godchildren, people that belong to that religious house. You want to look at their diversity. What's their makeup? Are we talking about a house where it's basically it's a group of families, married couples, pretty stable marriage couples, with kids, or not? Are we talking about something much less mundane, if you will? We want to know. You've got to look at that, because taking a look at the members of that religious group also begins to tell you how well you will or will not fit with the rest of that group. It's not just the priest and priestess that you're going to be encountering and establishing new relationships with. So that's also important. You want to see what's present there. You also want to look at the diversity of people. The people are coming from different walks of life. Are we talking about people that a house that's got a well-balanced combination. Okay? A well-balanced combination. We have business people, small business people, or whatever other kinds of business people. You know, are they coming from different trades, different backgrounds? How well-rounded and how reflective is is this group to the commons of the real world and the society where you find yourself with? You see? How diverse and how, in the image of the geography that you're in, how balanced is that group? You want to know. You want to know. Someone is saying here they can't hear me. Am I being heard? Or are we having a temporary glitch?
Right in the chat room, family. Yeah, refresh.
Okay. Refresh it. Okay.
No, not you, Oba.
No, I'm saying for people to refresh. Okay.
Yeah.
It's called a brain freeze. Another important thing to do is, besides, separate now the religious experience and kinds of cases and diversity of the home and its peoples, also look now towards other qualifications. Did this person graduate from high school? Did they, let's look at their formal educational level. What do we have there? Who are we talking to? We need to know. Okay? That's also telling. If we're dealing with someone who went through, all the way through college, we want to know, what did they study? What was their main life interest? What did they concentrate on? How is the subject that they studied? Because this is what they were driven naturally to do out of their own self-interest. Does that degree or that schooling, how is that relevant to you, the person? How connected are you to in those ways? Okay.
Oh my God.
What do you have in common there, and what you do not have in common there?
Oba, all the things that you're listing, I'm like, check it off. Didn't do. I'm like, oh my gosh. There's some of these things that I just totally bypassed my mind that I didn't look at when I was selecting a godparent.
Nobody thinks of this.
Oh, you said, and make sure you look at their schooling background, whether they went to college. I was like, I would have never thought about that, but it's so obvious. Duh.
Sure. Where'd you go to school? What was your environment like? What did you learn? What was your what were your intellectual curiosities? What were they? You see? Are you a reader? What do you like to read? Maybe we find out that the person likes to, has got an interest of reading horror stories, and that's precisely something that you enjoy is the same. So now we have a point of connection there. You know what I'm saying? We need to know that because all that goes to the personality that you're talking to. All of these things are important. So we need to look at those traits as well. Another thing that's very important is, how let's start looking at the person's, the personality here. What are we talking about? Are we talking about that this person is really conscious, aware, and offers teachings that are liberating, that are guidance, that help you in your decision makings, that allow the space for you to engage your free will and in a very sound and constructive way, Well, we need to, is that available? Is that what we're seeing from this character that we're trying to evaluate? We have to evaluate those attitudes. We have to be observant. We have to be a listener. Okay? How is this person expressing themselves? How do they deal with mundane issues in their own life decision making? Or when they're confronted with diverse issues from different people? When we're discussing TV news, something that came out on the news, whether it's politics, whether it's entertainment or social or whatever, or injuries, accidents, calamities, what is this person's rationale? How do they operate? How do they think things through? How do they analyze them? How do they, are they often, how well are they constructing a premise? How well are they moving in some kind of critical thinking mode here? How well is that being done? Or is there just simply, just at random irrational premises all the time that deliver an opinion based on false conclusions? Or is this person more of a sound thinker? Okay? Is this person, self-taught? Well, it doesn't matter whether you got it from school or if it's self. You need to engage. You need to get in there, and you need to understand that person's knowledge. What are they basing themselves on? Okay, how well are they in basic, moments where they're confronted with quick decision making? How well do they think on their feet and deliver, in a consistent way, sound, constructive, positive conclusions or advices? How well are they doing that in diverse subjects, in diverse circumstances? How well do they just go radical, crazy, out of control, and they need to pop a pill before they can think because they're constantly freaking out over the most simplistic things? How obsessive are they with issues? How obsessive do they get? How healthy is this person? We need to know that as well. Is this a pill popper? Because they're just, they need to be on pills all day long because they suffer from depression, or they're constantly suffering from intense anxiety. In other words, there are psychological disequilibriums here going on, that imbalances, and this person needs to be on meds all the time. What is it about this person's constant emotional state of being that is dependent on meds, and how well is this person separating their own imbalances and become my spiritual advisor or my guide?
Indeed.
We need to know all these things, okay?
And also with drinking as well. Do they,
what's their behavior? What's their habits? Is this person just, addicted to booze? What's going on with this person? Who am I talking to here? We need to dig in. And we need to dig in a respectful way, but slowly but surely, but we need to not be impressed by false outer presences, you know what I'm saying? The con job, you know what I'm saying? Or people, because they're so egocentric or just outright egomaniacs, are they really projecting themselves in ways which are really rather sociopathic?
Indeed. And Bob, we have 10 minutes, well, actually 11 minutes before we're going to continue on air, but we're going into the archives. So call in, family, to continue to listen live, because I want you to hit all these points. This is very, very important. So you have two numbers, family, to call into. You have 917-889-7207, 917-889-7207, and then you have a second number that you can call into to listen to, as going into the live stream, 917-889-7526. That's 917-889-7526. You have 10 minutes to call into the switchboard. The switchboards are packed, family. So make sure that you call in like now so you can continue to listen to this conversation. If not, you can listen in the archives, and I will also be editing this and cutting it and putting this on YouTube so you can watch this on Facebook. So continue, Oba. Continue, Elder.
Yes, well, I was just reading something that Okunsefi said. I'm not making, and by all means, let's be very focused on what I'm saying here. This is a generic guidelines that I've come up with after years of religious experience and speaking with my elders, not only within my own unit but outside, and getting to a consensus of what are key points that are rather universal for everyone, and that's what we have and what I'm presenting. In no way, shape, or form am I pointing fingers at anyone. I am not saying that we're full of a bunch of, incapable, unqualified people, or am I going into any criticisms one way or another, or praising anyone in particular. This is a very generic, straight-up guidelines for everyone that can draw from this lens, whether they belong to our religious systems or any other indigenous system. It does not matter, you see? This is the same kinds of thinking that can be used or extracted, the points being extracted here, where you can formulate and construct more questions from this that are more specific. For example, if you go to a tarot card reader, well, a lot of these questions will apply to a tarot card reader. Or if you like to go to an astrologist, well, you know what? A lot of these questions can be constructed, and others can be added to this, which are relevant and more specific to the field of astrology. So this is what I'm saying. Okay, this is a generic guideline that's applicable to everyone and can be somewhat modified, more questions can be added or whatever, or the questions can be formulated a little different, making it fit according to the person that you're putting your vulnerable psychic to. That's the point of this conversation.
And I also have to do a disclaimer and say, open the box of perception, family. When Oba says education, whether someone went to college, education means many things. There are many educated people who never went to college. So basically the bottom line to what Oba is saying with that question is, what are the potential godparents' critical thinking skills when it comes to solving problems with the Ile, solving individual problems, solving conflictual problems? And it comes down to a critical thinking concept, like how well do they use their critical thinking faculties? Yeah.
Exactly. In my days of the priesthood, there was no such thing as critical thinking as an academic discipline. Didn't exist. But you know where you got your critical thinking from? Your parents, your family, your colleagues. When I got into the priesthood, I began to understand what we're calling critical thinking, or standards of critical thinking, if you will, in the context of what this religion teaches, which is not going to the universities and taking a course in critical thinking.
Indeed.
But it is critical thinking. You see? So let's not get this twisted, all right? Let's not forget that 50 years of the education and the amount of people that had gone through formal education in an advanced nation like the United States, if we look at the numbers, the ratio there is quite different to 50 years later, okay? Now. Yes. So let's not get this twisted. And a lot of, back then, 50 years ago, people looked up to you if you had a high school diploma. That was enough. And in fact, most of the millionaires that I've ever met in my lifetime
never went to college.
Never graduated from high school.
Or went to college. Hello, look at Bill Gates.
Let alone college. College comes later.
Yep.
Okay?
Look at Bill Gates.
He dropped out of Harvard.
He dropped out of Harvard.
The guy dropped out of Harvard. And there's a bunch of Bill Gates out there right now. Right now, as we speak.
Making millions, baby.
And sit in front of these young people and start talking to them, man. They got a hell of a... They are intense critical thinkers. Intense.
And you know the Yemaya in the chat room, my little sweetheart. Yes, you are just being the devil's advocate.
That's cool. That's great.
Advocate. I
appreciate it.
I can't even speak to that.
Devil's
advocate. Yes, we want you to be the devil's advocate,
Absolutely.
darling. We want you to ask these questions and throw them out there because this is what critical thinking is. So you are on point, darling.
That's how I can address issues. Exactly.
Indeed. So you're doing excellently.
Those twisted questions out there, I can't explain them. So you're doing me a great honor in throwing these questions out. I'm not picking on you or twisting your words or your intention.
No, we're doing this for the people who are actually not in the chat room.
Yeah, this is good. This is perfect.
Yeah, for people who are not, doing what you're doing and sitting at home and thinking and saying, well, what about this, that, and the other? Because some people can't see the chat room. So
yeah,
your questions are fabuloso, darling, fabuloso.
So the other thing is be observant, be a good listener. The problem that I frequently find in this modern era that we're in, this current generation, is they're not listeners. They overwhelmingly want to be the talkers.
Indeed.
And I come from the old school. That habit of being a talker was removed very quickly. And I was taught to be a good listener first and foremost. And that is key. That is very important. So when you engage these religious systems, you need to be that good listener first and foremost, and be a good observer. I studied. I went to college and I studied cultural anthropology. That's what I found that I liked. And I remember when I first engaged that, I was saying, "Oh my God, everything, the principles of cultural anthropology, what I'm listening to here is exactly how the religion taught me to think." I made the instant connections. I'm saying the only thing I'm experiencing in college right now under this particular scientific discipline is that the information is systemic and organized. It takes you from one level of knowledge to the next and the next in this format. You see? The format may be different, but what I'm listening to was the same that I had already been trained to do in an oral tradition. So what we also need to understand is education means the godparents' manners. How respectful is this person? How humble can this person be? Or are they just totally bipolar and they're a lightning rod and they're constantly misconstruing and twisting their godchildren's intentions or what they say or why or their motivations? There's some of these people. Are we dealing with a person, a religious individual, who's a control freak? How does that stack up to your rights as a human being when we speak of free will? So we ought to have to understand that as well. You don't engage this to be codependent for life. You engage this religion to have a religious mentor there for you, that's got your back and with the best interest and the best relationship possible. And it's like going to college, okay? You're there for a purpose. And the purpose is transforming your state of knowledge. That's it, okay? You're not going to college to be perpetually going to college.
Indeed. I just want to say goodnight to our live listeners. If you still want to call in, you have 90 seconds, 917-889-7207, 917-889-7207. If not, we will see you on the upside. I send you a lot of love, family, and you can catch the rest of this conversation in the archives. I will also be downloading this via YouTube, Santeria One, Oba Ernesto Pichardo's YouTube channel, and I will be posting it on Facebook, so you'll be able to listen to the rest of this conversation right in the comfort of your home of Facebook. But we're going to continue with the show, and good night to everyone else who decides not to call in. Continue, Oba.
Yeah. I feel like we're about to take off.
We are.
We're all. Make sense?
Sí, señor.
Sí, señor. Okay. Me alegro que lo que yo estoy diciendo tenga un gran sentido.
Sí. Yes, okay. It makes a lot of sense. And that's what I said previously about the aleo and the aleo. It's something. It's a tangible. It's a feeling. It's evidence that you receive. And when it's not right, you get real, tangible, mundane, and spiritual evidence of these things. And it's not something that the English language can really articulate. I was hoping that you could articulate it, but it's really something that they can't be. It's that connection that is that can actually be seen.
Okay, so people like yourself or anyone else who's in this tradition who has this spiritual gift, whether it's visual or auditory, or even those that have the gift of trance, or those that have the ultimate gift, which is possession. You can't argue with these people because this becomes their life experience, and it's an ongoing constant. It's a constant. And as time progresses, it becomes a more and more of a constant, and more tangible, and more real, and more convincing. So you can't sit there and say, "Listen, I'm hallucinating." Well, what do I hallucinate every week? And everybody that I express my hallucination to regarding their individual lives, it turns out to be true. Come on now, that goes beyond the ability of science to explain. So I think we kind of briefly, but I think in a nutshell, we understand the first two levels of act. We're here to inquire, and the diviner's role is to inquire and get to the essence, or to the core of why you're going through what you're going through, and also to get the spiritual guidance, not the human, but the spiritual guidance as to what the remedy is. And we expect that remedy, that once the ritual is done, we're expecting, we're projecting, we're understanding what the end result will be. Which is also radically from a Christian perspective. You go to church every Sunday and you pray your heart out, and you put all your goodwill behind your prayers and your human conduct and everything else, but nobody's talking to you. Nobody in that church knows your problems. You're not hearing a voice or visualizing and seeing Jesus or anyone else standing before you and talking to you and giving you direction and being very specific and giving you guidance. You see? It's a whole different other realm. It's a whole experience. Radically different. Here we do, and that's another difference between Christianity and Lukumi. When you come to Lukumi, yes, we are here to question God. We want to know, God, why I am going through what I am going through, and God, I want you to tell me what I need to do to fix my problem. And I will trust that when you tell me how to the remedy, I trust and I expect the remedy to work. It has to be tangible, God. It cannot be that God was busy and forgot to fix my problem, or the patients I need to wait until God decides to be gracious enough to fix my problem. See, that's the difference between the faith approach and this tangible approach. And that's also a very important thing that people need to understand coming from a Judeo-Christian culture. There's a radical difference here, it says here. The third level, of course, is the God-parent level, which is a whole other new world, a whole other difference. This is like entering a seminary, okay? That's a different relationship. Now we're talking that there's protocols, there's rules, there's regulations of human conduct. There's a systemic approach to your religiosity and how you connect and disconnect to the spiritual reality. Your spiritual reality also comes forth and manifests itself in ways in which are demanding, in ways that the individual human is not used to absorbing and responding to. So it becomes a very complex learning process. A lifetime is now viewed in a whole other different worldview because you're engaging your reality in from a different scope of things, and the manifestations and what the teachings are in real time, what those experiences are, the consistency of it, the accuracy of such experiences are constantly evolving and increasing in its tangibility, and that is a fact. That's how it that's the world you enter, and so now we're talking priesthood. You're getting into that realm of priesthood. So you're entering a world of huge complexity that I don't care how many years of priesthood one has. When you enter the priesthood of Lukumi faith, you have entered a new way of life, a daily living, with a knowledge that is very individual. And that spiritual DNA, as I call it, is very individualized. And that individualized DNA is basically characterizes the essential traits of one's God-given gift once we're born. We're born with that spiritual DNA. So this becomes a lifestyle as a disciple. And I've seen that in their lives and in their life work with others. You see? So thousands, I lost count when it comes to thousands, you see? So it goes beyond this notion or this potential argument that, which is rather superficial and dismissive. It's not out of coincidence. This is not coincidental. This is matter of fact. This is here and now. That every time we do a consultation and we say to someone, look, how you doing? You seem everything at work seems like you're secured and everything is fine, is wonderful. Not true. You're going to be fired within 90 days. Something is going to happen where you're going to get fired. And yes, within 90 days, something out of the blue, the unimaginable takes place, and you are fired in 90 days. But you know what? At the same time you said that to that person, you said another 20 things to other 20 different people, and in that same 90-day period, all 20 cases, each in their individual mundane issues, were accurate. And this happens to you over and over and over and over again as a matter of individual experiencing, is it? Mm-hmm. That's what becomes individually convincing. That's radically different to the culture that we're in and the mindset of the culture that we're in, and, if you will, the interpretation or the lens coming from a Judeo-Christian belief system. Radically different. Radically different. In fact, I have not said this yet, but I should have, and now it's just remembered. When people come in for a consultation, they're going to interrogate. They're there to inquire and interrogate God. That's what the consultation is. They're there to interrogate the spiritual realm. It's, you tell me what's going on in my life to convince me that you're connected. Once you do that, I want to know the remedy. We're
attachments, that are attached to the people walking down the street past me. So this is a concept, of course, but this is something that it's not a faith thing. This is a knowing.
This is a knowing, yes.
Yeah, it's a knowing. It's a very different thing, like you said, in sitting in the pews and having faith and so on and so forth. No, this is a knowing. It's very different. I'm glad you mentioned that.
This is something that becomes irrefutably convincing to the individual because of their life experiences, where it is a constant evidence, a constant deliverance. And you see it not just with your own personal lives, but you're seeing it all around you with other people in their own lives. So it becomes not only an individual, but it becomes also a collective testimony of fact, not just speculative or outright blatant faith as we understand it. I believe it because I want to believe it. No, this is not I believe it because I want to believe it. Here's where you become I am in this because I'm convinced of its reality, because I've seen it over and over and over and over again in my individual life and in the life of others. It becomes that convincing beyond the notion of coincidence. Goes beyond coincidence. Like, for example, someone like myself, I've been practicing for 41 years now. You know how many thousands of people I've consulted that I've divined for?
It's in the thousands, I know.
It's in the thousands. And I can tell you that I can guarantee you that every one of those thousands have been an experience to me, to my own religiosity, to my own spirituality, to my own state of being convinced of its reality. Because I've seen it in so many thousands of cases that I myself are handling, let alone those that I trained with, those that taught me and their experiences as I was there as an apprentice and later on